The Dark Universe. A universe that only took one movie for it to all come crashing down before anything was really built. Well, before the Mummy crashed it down, we had Dracula Untold, which I'm convinced that was going to sort of be the beginning, but that also didn't work out. I thought this movie was interesting. Let's talk about it. Welcome to Durbania, I'm Durbin, and this is my theological takeaway from Dracula Untold. Overall, I found this movie pretty interesting. I mean, it's not the strongest, Dracula vampire film that is out there, but I think it is incredibly entertaining and a solid B movie. So yeah, I'm gonna give this movie a solid B. I enjoyed it the first time I saw it. I enjoyed it the other day when I watched it again for the first time in years. There's just a lot of good story elements working in this movie. And one of the things that is the most interesting to me is looking at Prince Vlad himself, Vlad the Impaler. His character arc through this movie shows us the power of darkness. Here he turns to this vampire in the beginning. He turns to darkness to give him the power for good reasons, it seems, right? He wants to defend his wife, he wants to defend his son, and he wants to defend his people. So it seems like it's all good and all noble, but the problem is, giving yourself to darkness doesn't really solve anything. It in fact creates even more problems, because darkness is always on the outside looking for a way to get in. And whatever vessel it can use, it's going to take that vessel and make it a pawn. It's going to make it a slave. It's going to break it down so that vessel is in the image of that darkness, and the darkness can flow straight through it. So nothing good could come of fighting dark with dark. And that's Vlad's character arc and what he discovers in this. Because when this movie opens, Vlad has repented of being Vlad the Impaler. In fact, he's passionate. Dracula, what does it mean? Son of the devil. No! He is very passionate that it means son of the dragon, defender of the innocent. That's the interpretation of his name that he clings to desperately, because he's already repented of the monster that he once was. His goals in life now, he's Prince Vlad. He wants to be a good prince for his people. He wants to be a good husband for his wife. He wants to be a good father for his son. His intentions are good, they're noble, and really, you almost can't even see the monster of Vlad the Impaler in him at all when this movie opens. It starts with him in that good place. He's haunted by his past, but that haunting isn't even consuming him. He is a good dude, but that all changes. Because once upon a time, he was one of those young boys that was given over to an army. And when he was given over to that, he gave himself to that monster to become that thing that men fear. And now that the Sultan is requesting 1,000 boys from Vlad to be part of his army, he doesn't want that. It's awakening that past in him and what he became through that. And the fact that the Sultan even wants Vlad's son there, for Vlad's son to be one of those boys, it freaks him out even more because he doesn't want his past to be his son's future. So what's the first thing he does?
Then take me.
If he could spare his son and these other boys from this fate, he'd be willing to give himself to that again. It's interesting how selfless this all begins. But when that offer is rejected, and even more so now they want his son, he freaks out. And what he's going to decide to do is take the easy way out. Because see, he already discovered the vampire living in the cave up there in that mountain. He already knew what that was. He already knew the power that was there. So rather than turning to the light, he turns to his past. He turns to the monster that he once was. But the monster as it was, as crazy and scary as that monster was, isn't enough to defeat this entire army. So what does he do? He surrenders himself to this vampire so that he could be turned. He submits to that kind of death so that he could be reborn with all this new strength and power, so that that monster, Vlad the Impaler, can now have the power it needs to be a one-man army and defend his people. Now again, it's coming from a place of nobility, right? Defend his people, spare his son, spare his wife. These are his goals. This is what's on his mind. But even the vampire that was imprisoned to that cave, talking of the price, said, you will have an insatiable thirst for blood. If you don't drink blood in 3 days, you'll become a mortal man again. But if you drink blood within those 3 days,
The price would be worse than if you'd never stepped in here. You will become its vessel, as I am. A scourge on this earth. And one day, I will call on you to serve me, my pawn.
But he takes it. He's thinking in his own strength and in his own power, he can overcome. And one of the things that's so brilliant about this movie is once he takes that blood and he becomes the vampire, they do a good job taking you through these 3 nights and showing you his temptation. Anytime somebody bleeds or he sees the blood pumping through his wife's neck, you see his temptation. I mean, you see him resisting with every ounce that he is. And you see that oh crap look in his eyes when he realizes this is harder than I thought. This is worse than I thought it was going to be. But what's even worse than that is not just how strong that temptation was and how much stronger it was than he thought it was going to be, but you can see slowly the darkness is turning him, because he starts as a very noble man. But when everybody finds out that he's drunk vampire blood and that he has become a vampire and, they try to burn him alive, I'm not gonna lie, I'd be pretty mad too. Does he walk out of that place and say, hey, I get it, guys. I know why you're trying to burn me alive. But look, I submitted myself to this darkness so I could get these powers so that I could save you all. I know it's scary, but if you would just help me, then I won't have to drink blood and I will be cured and be a human again and everything's gonna be fine. I just need you to help me resist while I go and take out this entire army and save you all. Like if he had just even had that moniker of compassion, but he didn't. This is what he did.
This is your loyalty, your gratitude. Do you think you are alive because you can fight? You are alive because of me!
Slowly, the darkness was transforming him into its own image.
Then take me. Fools.
He was becoming a vessel and a pawn of the darkness. And even with all of that power, he couldn't save his wife from death. And so as she was dying, after she fell from that tower and he couldn't, I don't know why he couldn't go fast enough to save her. I'm guessing because it was day number 3 and maybe his powers were leaking out of him. I don't know. But he couldn't save her, and I guess that's kind of the point of this. And in her dying breath, her wish was take my blood and go save our son from this future. So he does. He takes the blood, setting free the bad vampire, meaning one day he will be that bad vampire's pawn, and he'll have to pay that heavy price. He pretty much damned his soul by sealing his fate as this vampire. And as he rushes out to save his son, he turns his people that were fallen so that they too become vampires. And they're just insatiable. They don't even try to resist the blood. He defeats his enemy. He saves his son. And then the people he turned, they want to kill his kid. So that way he'll be set free and then he could serve the whole vampire cause. You see, it's darkness working through all of them, getting a foothold. It offered power. It offered something beautiful. It dangled it in front of Vlad. But it took a hold of Vlad's past and the darkness that was in there. It amplified it and it began to transform him so it could get a foothold in the world. So he does do the right thing. He gives his son over to the monk. And what's incredible here is you see the power that's in the cross. It's just this one little cross, but it held back all of the vampires. They couldn't touch Vlad's son as long as that monk was holding him and that cross was out. That's how powerful the cross was. That one tiny thing was filled with so much power that all the darkness in the world couldn't come near it. That right there is a telling message. Because what would have happened if Vlad had turned to the light instead of the dark? Do you remember Joshua? 5 Amorite kings came against him. They all came together. That would have been a massively huge army, and God fought for Israel. Joshua prays to God, and he told the sun to stand still. And God answered his prayer and had the sun stand still so they could win the battle and win the day. That's the power of God at work. I mean, just look at the Israelites being slaves in Egypt. Was it a mighty, massive military force that set them free? No, it was the very power of God and the signs and wonders that he worked that set Israel free. If Moses had turned to darkness, it would have just transformed him into darkness. It would have done nothing, but he turned to the light. That's what we need to take as a lesson in our lives. Sometimes it feels like things coming against us are just too big. In 2 Kings, there's this story where you have Elisha, the prophet. He's in this city, and this massive army comes just to take him. And Elisha's servant is freaking out. And Elisha says, you don't need to freak out. There's more with us than there is out there coming against us. And the servant's like, are you blind? And Elisha's like, I think you're blind. Lord, open his eyes. And when his eyes are open, he saw like this angel army, fiery chariots all around the mountain range. There was indeed more with them than was coming against them. The Bible is clear, greater is he who is in us than he who is in the world. It's tempting that when things come against us, we want to turn to the darkness. We don't call it the darkness, but we turn to addictions for refuge, for escape, for just some measure of just get me out of this for just a few seconds. I mean, we turn to things for our refuge, but it seems that those things might feel like they give us a moment of reprieve, might feel like they give us a moment of having some power, but really it just seems to increase the darkness's hold over us. But if we turn to the light, then we know that greater is he who is in us than he who is in the world. When we submit to Jesus, when we actually humble ourselves before him and submit to him, that's when the devil flees. He flees when we resist him after we've humbled ourselves before God, after we've submitted to him. You can't defeat darkness with more darkness. You can't defeat monsters with more monsters, because then you just still have the monsters. But when you turn to the light, you flip the light switch on a room, boom, the darkness is gone. When we turn to God in our lives for those battles that we face, that's when we find the real victory. So that's the message, that's the theological takeaway I get from Dracula Untold. He turned to the darkness, which just begat more darkness and made him a slave, instead of turning to God, who knows what miracles God could have done to have saved him, his people, and his wife and his son. But at this point, we'll never know. What did you think of Dracula Untold? Let's talk about that in the comments. Are you looking forward to The Invisible Man? And tomorrow, I'm going to be talking about The Mummy with Tom Cruise 2017. So I'll be doing my theological takeaway from The Mummy, the one that kind of crashed the Dark Universe that The Invisible Man was originally going to be a part of. I'm looking forward to diving into that with you. So hit that subscribe button below and hit the bell by that subscribe button so you're notified when I drop that video or any other theological takeaway, movie review, ranking video, trailer reaction, or anything else I do here. I'm Durbin. Thanks for checking out Durbania.